Hello students and welcome to the lecture. So students, as we know that we have been discussing over the voting behavior, right? And basically in this particular series, like these are the topics that we have scheduled for the discussion, like starting with the history of democracy and voting, importance of voting, historic vote, legal framework, election machinery, political landscape and party participation, election outcome, voting and approach, the explanation part, the meaning of voting behavior, the significance of voting behavior, determinants of voting behavior, and the role of media in elections and voting behavior. Alright, these are the topics that we have scheduled for the discussion. If we talk about the topics that we have covered so far, so basically we have done with the history of democracy and voting, and we have done with the importance of voting. Other topic on which we have been discussing on, this is the historic vote, and the remaining topics are the legal framework, the election machinery, okay, the political landscape and the party participation, the election outcome, voting and approach, the explanation part, meaning of voting behavior, significance of voting behavior, determinants of voting behavior, and the role of media in elections and voting behavior. Okay, so we can say that this is the picture that we have created so far altogether. So basically in this lecture we will start from where we had left in the previous lecture. In the previous lecture we were discussing over this historical vote. Okay, like the independent India's first general election was held between the October 25, 1951 till 21st February 1952. That was a time period in which the first general election was happened in the independent India. And we had discussed that this was a monumental event. Why? Because during this time, 1/6 of the world's population was involved in this. And basically, due to this, that was the world's largest general election that has held over that time. And we had discussed that there were 173 million voters across the country who registered themselves, and 45% of them were the women. Okay, and why we exclude the Jammu and Kashmir from this, I had explained this to you in detail form. Okay, thereafter we had discussed that this was the world's first time then we were seeing the universal adult franchising, because this is the idea that we had incorporated in our constitution. So when we were organizing the general election for the first time, even then we promoted the idea of universal adult franchising. Okay, and we had discussed that when the elections were started in our country, so basically the age system that we had was very much similar to the American age system. Okay, like when we were discussing about the first instance of the normal voting in the America in 1776, so we had discussed that the white men who were above the age of 21, they had the voting rights. Okay, similar pattern is here, but the difference is that in India there is a universal adult franchise, but the age was similar. Okay, but later on, as we had discussed, that through the 61st Amendment Act of 1989, through the 61st Amendment Act of 1989, basically the age lowered from 21 to 18. Okay, and we had discussed that whom 82% were basically illiterate. Okay, so this is what we had covered in the previous lecture. Now let's see a way forward of it. So basically, if we talk about the legal framework, like how did we organize the election for the first time in India? Why? Because if we talk about today, then today we know the time has been changed drastically. Okay, so many things have been changed, and so many things are not as similar as they were during the time of 1950s. Okay, so how we conducted the election for the first time, how we prescribed the things. Okay, and how all the things were managed, that is important. Okay, so basically the parliament passed the Representations of People's Act 1950 and 1951. Okay, so the first act was passed in 1950. Later on, the act provisions were modified in 1951. Okay, so these two acts were the first pillars through which the process of democracy established in India. The foundation for voter qualification, election machinery, and other electoral process basically determined by these two acts. Voter qualification means like who would be eligible to vote in India. All right. So you will say that there is a universal adult franchising. Okay. So if anyone who is above the age of 18 years, that should vote. Okay. But this is half truth. All right. It means that basically we eliminated the ways of discrimination. Okay. We eliminated this. Like no one could be discriminated for voting if he or she is above the certain age. But the qualification of voter, you can say the basic qualifications will remain as it is. Okay, and how will the elections would carry out, that was mentioned in this act, and how would be the electoral processes would be carried on. All these criteria, all the things were mentioned in 1950 and 1951 acts. Okay, thereafter, if we talk about the Election Commission of India, and we know the Election Commission of India, we had already covered, is the organization in the country that is responsible to conduct the free and fair elections. Okay, that is responsible to conduct the free and fair elections. Okay, and you can say, or let me ask you a simple question like, whose election the Election Commission considers? Okay, and you can say the Election Commission of India is responsible to conduct the election to which areas? Okay, or to which offices, or you can say to which political offices. There could be so many modifications in a one single sentence. All right, so to answer this question you have 30 seconds, then I will give you the answer. So your time starts now. Just think about it, we had already discussed about it. Okay, 10 seconds have been passed off, last 20s are remaining. Okay, last 10 seconds are remaining. Okay, the time's up. So basically the Election Commission of India is responsible for the election of some offices that we had already discussed. The office of President, the office of Vice President, okay, parliamentary elections, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, okay. Thereafter, state legislature elections. All right. So these are the elections to which the Election Commission of India is responsible. Whereas we had already discussed about the State Election Commission. So now you are required to recall that the State Election Commission is responsible for the elections to the Panchayati Raj and to the municipalities. Okay, so these are the areas that we had discussed. So now if we come back, so the Election Commission of India was basically formed in January 1950. Okay, and Sukumar Sen, was appointed as the first chief election commissioner of the country. His name was Sukumar Sen. Or there is one thing also that we had discussed in the lecture of the election commission that you are also required to recall. And what was that? Basically, when we established the election commission, okay, when we established it during the 1950s, the election commission was the single member body. All right, it means that there used to be only one election commissioner on that time. Okay, and Sukumar Sen was the first election commissioner that had been appointed to the office after the establishment in January 1950. Okay, and thereafter we know since 1950 to 1989, basically the election commission used to the single member body. Then what happened in 1989? Basically, for the first time, two additional election commissioners were appointed to the office. Okay, and then the election commission transformed from single person body to the multi-member body. Okay, as there were three election commissioners. One used to be the chief election commissioner, and other two were the election commissioners, or you can say subordinate to the chief. But later on, we know during the 90s, again, the election commission became a single member body. Then again, it became the multi-member body, as you can say further two additional election commissioners appointed again. So that's how the election commission, you can say, waved out from the establishment till now. All right, please remember the name Sukumar Sen. The question may be asked like, who amongst the following was the first election commissioner of the India? So the answer should be the Sukumar Sen. If we move forward, now we are going to see about the election machinery. And this is also important. Why? Because right now, just think about it. Like in the previous lectures, I had told you, the election in India is the major event. Why? Because India is the world's largest democracy. Okay, one of the highest population of the world. All right. So you can say whenever the election conducts in India, so this is the major event from the world's point of view also. Okay, because India holds a significant position in terms of culture, in terms of military, in terms of trade. So whichever the party with the manifesto will be elected to the parliament, or you can say will form the government. So whatever the party's policies will be there, that will be considered as a national policy. So technically, the India's national policy will be the policy of some political party. So how will the political party continue the term of 5 years, and how will the world affected because of the India's decision on certain areas for the 5 years? That becomes the important topic. Okay, so if we talk about today's scenario, then we know the elections are very much organized, even the literacy rate and all have been changed. But if we compare it with the era in which we got independent, like 1947, 1950 and now, all right, so what do you think? The things are same as they today now? No, the things were very different, or you can say quite different than they are today. All right, so basically on that time, how we carried out the election for the first time, that is very important. Like as I have told you, basically the Britishers through the 1861 Act opened the legislative offices for the Indians. Okay, but their approach was making the Indians as the ex officio member. All right, and I have told you that ex officio member is the person who would be the part of the assembly, who would be the part of the organization, but who could only sit and speak but could not cast the vote during the decisions. All right, so Britishers had the approach that they should listen the Indian opinions, but the powers should be in the hands of the British, because the Indians did not have any voting rights, so that they could not influence the decisions of the meeting. That was their approach, right? Thereafter, what happened? Over the period of time, various acts were passed. Okay, and then India introduced the election system also. Like the Indians who got elected to the legislative and the executive assemblies and the councils of the Viceroy and the different lieutenant governors of the provinces, they had the, you can say, powers for speak, voting, and sitting in the meetings of the assemblies. And even the normal Indians were allowed to vote and select the candidate to be the part of the assembly under the British government. But what I told you, that basically these were not allowed universally. What is the meaning of this? Basically, the concept of universal adult franchisee was not applicable on that time, right? And basically, only the few Indians that were rich, that had lands, that were literate, these had the voting rights. And apart from these, general population of the India did not have any voting right. So similarly, when we got independence, the first thing that we had changed was the universal adult franchise. Okay, we made it like anyone who is above the 21 years of age, because we are talking about 950. 1950 was the year when the voting age was 21. That age was changed in 1989 by passing of the 61st Constitutional Amendment Act. But here we are talking about the first election that was in the 1952. So that's why we are not saying that the voting age was 18. The voting age for that time was 21. So basically, when we conducting the election, so basically we said anyone who is a citizen of this country and above the age of 21, then he or she could vote. So that was the major challenge on that time. Like how we would go to the people, how we would invite them for the voting, and how they should be become aware about the process of voting. Okay, so basically these were the challenge, but the major challenge of that time was the largely illiterate electorate. Why? Because if we talk about the time of independence, when we got the independence from the Britishers, if we talk about it, so many Indians were illiterate. Okay, the literacy rate of India was you can say somewhere about 23 or 37%. I'm not knowing the exact figure, but it was nearby that. You can go and check it by yourself. All right, so basically the India's, you can say, the literacy rate was very low on that time. Okay, so because of this, that became a problem. Like how the election commission, how the organizations would ensure that the people choosing the right candidate as they wanted to. Okay, like if we talk about today's scenario, then today we had you can say we see the debates on the news channels, we see the debates on the social media platforms, even we organize the debates by ourselves, like that should be the manifesto, okay, that should be the policy in this and that field, this party, that party, okay, we are supporting this candidate now. So why? Because now we have the knowledge of that field. Okay, but just imagine the scenario that you got the independence from the colonizers after the rule of 250 years, or you can say 250 years after you are getting the independence. All right, and you just asking for the votes, how you would choose the candidate, how you would choose the party, how you will identify that this particular candidate belong to that party and this particular candidate is the candidate that I wanted to choose. All right, so basically the largely illiterate electorate was the threat in the 1951 elections. Okay, and you can say that was the biggest headache in front of the Election Commission of India, and even the biggest challenge that we need to face. Okay, then what happened? We took a solution of it and we introduced the colored ballot boxes and the ballot papers, and the size of rupee 1 currency note were utilized. So what is the meaning of this? Like how did we overcome the problem by using the colored ballot boxes and the ballot papers, and what was the use of rupee 1 currency note? But main thing is that how these things were organized, that should be our main concern, and you can say that was our main you can say concept to be understand. All right, so basically if we talk about it further, so we can say given the low literacy rate of 18.33%, 18.33% at that time, okay, the initial idea that we employed was to use different colored ballot boxes for each candidate. It means that suppose if there are 5 candidates conquesting in the election, like A, B, C, D and E, so we use different colors. Okay, like red, blue, green, yellow, violet. All right, and each color given to one candidate. All right, so suppose A having red, B having blue, C having green, D having yellow, and E having violet. Okay, each candidate having its own color, and as per the color he is having the ballot boxes. Okay, so you can say, suppose if you wanted to give your vote to A, okay, and you can say if in your opinion A is the right candidate, so you are required to cast your vote in the red wallet paper, or you can say ballot box. Why? Because red is the color that had been assigned to A. Similarly, if you want to give your vote to E, okay, in your opinion E is the right candidate, then you require to put your vote in the violet ballot box. Why? Because violet color had been assigned to A. Okay, so that was a system that we employed, but what happened that this system didn't work out as we expected it to be. Why? Because this was found to be impractical. And how we say that this is impracticable? Now just compare it today. Okay, if we talk about the parliament, okay, in parliament we know there is a Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Lok Sabha having the direct elections, Rajya Sabha not having the direct elections. Okay, so even if we take the Rajya Sabha, it means that the candidates who wanted to get selected for the Rajya Sabha, they have to conquer the election, or you can say general elections. All right, so now take the seats of the Rajya Sabha. Okay, now we are not talking about the current seats, we are talking about the seats that we had promised in 1950. Why? Because here we are talking about the 1951 elections. All right, so basically in that time the seats, okay, were 552 seats. Okay, so now just imagine if even one political party nominates one candidate against one seat. Okay, then if you multiply 552 seats with the number of candidates, that will be in thousands, right? So 1,000 candidates were conquesting the elections. All right, and many parties were conquesting the elections. So that's why if instead of political party, if the ballot boxes were starting given to the candidates, it means that 1,000 color we have to choose and one color for one candidate only. It means that every candidate must have the unique color. And now you can imagine by yourself that it is totally impracticable. Why? Because 1,000 color and 1,000 colored ballot boxes, and every color should be unique as per the candidate. It is not possible to implement on that time. Okay, so we had to drop this idea. So the idea of providing the colored ballot boxes against the candidates were dropped. So if the one idea that we just employed, we had to drop it, then what new idea we employed? So basically, instead of separate colored ballot boxes, okay, what happened? Separate ballot boxes were provided to the each candidate at all polling station, and then we marked with the candidate's election symbol. Okay, so basically we can say, suppose if you ever voted, if you ever given your vote in the elections, then you must be aware about it, like each and every candidate who is conquesting in the election. So there are two conditions only. The candidate is belonging to some particular political party, or is an independent candidate. Okay, so if the person belonging to the political party, just take the first case, if the person belonging to some political party, we know every political party has its own symbol. All right, so the candidate who was conquesting through the party, he will use that symbol. For example, suppose if we talk about today's political party, like the Bharatiya Janata Party, having its symbol as a lotus, then the Indian National Congress, the hand, okay, Aam Aadmi Party having broom. So any candidate of these parties who is conquesting the elections, they will use the same symbol. Like the BJP candidate will use the lotus, Congress candidate will use the hand, and Aam Aadmi Party candidate will use the broom. Alright, so that's why it's became easier to give the candidate's election symbol on the ballot box. And similarly, if the candidate is the independent candidate, he is not conquesting from any political party. Even when he will volunteer for the registration to conquest the elections, the Election Commission of India will give him the unique symbol. Okay, that will be used for his identification while polling the votes. Alright, so that system worked a lot in comparison with the first idea that we had employed, like providing the colored ballot boxes for each candidate, because the provision of 1,000 colored ballot boxes was not possible and not feasible. But providing the ballot box containing the election symbol of the political party to which the candidate belongs, it was quite easier. Okay, so the ballot papers were pink, their color was pink, and basically they containing the sign of Election Commission India. Okay, and there were used to be the serial number on the ballot paper so that it could be counted how many ballot papers have been issued, and similarly it could be counted like how many votes have been polled. For example, suppose you are sitting at the polling station and you are the in charge of that polling station, for example. All right, and voting was started at 8 a.m. and at 1 p.m. some of your senior came to you and asked, tell me how many votes have been polled since the morning. Are you able to tell him? If you are using the serial number, you can easily tell him. Why? Because if papers containing the numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so you are just required to see that what number is going on. For example, if you ask your subordinate, just tell me the serial number of that particular ballot paper you are holding in your hand, and he said, sir, it is 501. So it means that prior to this number, it means 1 to 500, this serial number has been distributed and hence the vote fold. So you can say that you will be able to answer your senior, yes sir, the 500 votes have been polled so far. Alright, so that's why the serial number were put on the ballot paper so that it could be easily count out like how many votes have been polled for a given duration. And in addition to this, there were also the two letters indicating the states. There were two letters which were indicating the state, and the letters were as like HY indicating the Hyderabad state, BR indicating the Bihar, AS indicating the Assam. Alright, now most of you will counter Hyderabad state. What is the meaning of this? Hyderabad is not the state, Hyderabad is the city. Then why we have mentioned here Hyderabad is the state? So basically here you are recall the, or you can say here you are required to recall the one concept that we had already covered. Basically we had discussed that when we got independence, so India was not politically and consequently that much organized as it is today. Okay, like we have the three divisions today right now. These are the state territories, union territories, and the second one is the territories that may be acquired by the India anytime. Okay, if we compare it with the division that we had got while the independence, so there was a classification: part A, part B, part C, and part D. Part A are the British states with the lieutenant governors. Part B, princely state with the legislatures. Part C were the union territories that were controlled by the chief commissioners. Part D contained the Andaman Nicobar. Thereafter, we had discussed that over the period of time, basically the states were reorganized as we see today. Alright, so basically when we talk about the 1951 elections, then even on that time the states were not organized. And when we talk about Hyderabad, so Hyderabad was then the state, not a city. Okay, Hyderabad later break down into the Andhra Pradesh and later and the Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. On that time, it was the state of Hyderabad that was under the control of Nizam prior to the independence. Okay, so These were the things. Okay, so here we have seen like how the election machinery worked for it. Okay, like we use the colored ballot boxes and ballot papers. Okay, priorly we had decided that we should provide the ballot boxes or colored ballot boxes, unique colored ballot boxes for each candidate. But then we had found that this is impracticable. Why? Because we tried to implement it in the real scenario. Then we had discussed that basically when our first idea got failed, we choose the alternative of it. Okay, and basically we provide the ballot boxes containing the symbol of political party the candidate belonged to. All right. Then we had discussed that the ballot boxes containing the serial number so that the number of voting could be counted. All right. And there were two letters on the top which indicating the state. Okay. If we move forward, then we can say that basically a total of 53 political parties participated in the election. Okay. So here you can say in the 1951 election, for the first time when the India was experiencing the event of election, how many participated? 53 political parties participated. And out of these 53, 14 were the national parties, that including the Indian National Congress, the Communist Party of India, the Socialist Party, okay, the Kisan Mazdoor Praja Sabha, the Akhil Bharatiya Hindu Mahasabha, and many others. Okay, so that was the scenario. So students, basically in this lecture we have discussed till here. In the next lecture we will start from here. Till then, just revise the facts and figures that all we have discussed in this lecture and be ready for the other lecture. With this note, let's end this lecture and thank you.